On April 26, 1986, a name was burned into human history: Chernobyl, an event so catastrophic it sent shockwaves, both literal and political, across the entire globe. But this wasn't just one single accident. No, it was a perfect storm of a flawed design, some really critical human errors, and a culture of secrecy that made everything so much worse. We're going to break down exactly what happened, step by tragic step. And it all really boils down to this one central question. How on earth does a test designed to improve safety, lead to the exact opposite? A complete meltdown, an explosion, the worst nuclear disaster we've ever seen. We're going to follow that chain of events to see just how it was even possible. All right, let's set the scene. Our story begins in the control room of reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. It's late at night and the crew's getting ready to run a test. The whole point was to see if the reactor's turbines, as they were spinning down, could generate enough emergency power to keep the cooling systems going during a blackout. Seems sensible, right? It was supposed to be completely routine. Now, to understand what went wrong, you have to understand the technology they were working with. The Chernobyl plant used what are called RBMK reactors, and these things were workhorses, super powerful, but they had a huge hidden flaw. See, at low power levels, instead of getting safer and more stable, they could become incredibly volatile, incredibly difficult to control. It was basically a ticking time bomb built right into the heart of the system. So this is where things start to go really, really wrong. The operators made a series of mistakes that just kept compounding that design flaw. First, they let the reactor's power drop way too low, pushing it right into that dangerous, unstable state. Then, trying to get the power back up, they disabled several key safety systems. And finally, they pulled out almost all of the control rods, which, are basically the brakes on a nuclear reaction. At this point, the reactor was completely unchained. So there it is, the reactor is in this incredibly dangerous state. And at 1:23 in the morning, the operators begin the test. This is the moment. The countdown ends, and the catastrophe begins. As the power starts to surge completely out of control, the operators do what you'd think they should do. They slam the emergency shutdown button, the AZ5. Now, this should have dropped all the control rods back into the core and stopped the reaction cold. But in what has to be one of the most catastrophic design flaws in history, the tips of those rods were made of graphite, which for a split second actually sped up the reaction before slowing it down. So instead of shutting down, hitting that button caused a massive instantaneous power spike. I mean, look at that number. In just a few seconds, the reactor's output surged to over 100 times its maximum level. There was just no way to contain that kind of energy. The result was, well, it was inevitable. 2 enormous explosions just tore the reactor building apart. The force was unimaginable. It blew the 1,000-ton lid, that's a lid weighing more than 2 jumbo jets, clean off the reactor, exposing the super hot, glowing radioactive core to the night sky. The first people to run into this hellscape were the local firefighters. They showed up in minutes, with no idea what they were walking into. To them, it was a fire at an industrial plant, and their job was to put it out. They were standing in one of the most radioactive places on Earth, and they didn't even know it. Absolute heroes. But that heroism came at a terrible, terrible price. With the reactor core now wide open, the immediate danger of the explosions gave way to something new, something silent. The fire was literally pumping tons of radioactive material straight up into the atmosphere. It was creating this invisible cloud of poison that would soon travel for thousands of miles. This chart really gives you a sense of just how big this was. The radioactive cloud didn't care about borders. It spread all across Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia, and then just kept drifting over huge parts of Europe. It was carrying some nasty stuff too, like iodine-131 and cesium-137, things that would contaminate the land for decades. And while this invisible cloud was spreading, the Soviet government said nothing. This was the final, devastating piece of the perfect storm. In the nearby city of Pripyat, life just went on as normal. People even went out on a bridge to watch the beautiful, almost rainbow-colored glow from the burning reactor, having no idea they were receiving fatal doses of radiation. Just look at this timeline. The government waited for nearly 36 hours, a day and a half, before they even started to evacuate the 49,000 people living in Pripyat. Buses finally rolled in, and people were told to pack just the essentials for what they were told would be a 3-day trip. Of course, they never came back. Pripyat, a city built from the ground up for the plant's workers and their families, was abandoned forever. Today, it just stands there, a chilling monument to the disaster, a ghost city, frozen in 1986. So, the mission shifted from rescue to containment. The Soviet Union mobilized this massive effort, calling up hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking soldiers, miners, scientists, engineers. They all became known as the liquidators, and their job was to fight a war against an enemy that they couldn't even see. I mean, their to-do list was just monumental. They had to put out the raging fire in the core itself, dropping sand and lead on it from helicopters. They had to clean up intensely radioactive debris scattered everywhere, bury contaminated soil, and, most importantly, build a massive structure to entomb the entire destroyed reactor. This part of the story is just incredible. The radiation on the roof of the reactor building was so intense that it completely fried the electronics of the advanced robots they sent in to help clean it up. So the job fell to men. They were nicknamed bio-robots. They would run out onto the roof for just 45 to 90 seconds, long enough to shovel one pile of debris and then run back. It was an unbelievable act of sacrifice. All of that effort culminated in the sarcophagus, a massive concrete shell they built in just 200 days to cover the ruins of Reactor 4. But everybody knew it was just a temporary fix, a Band-Aid. So, in 2016, this truly massive engineering marvel, the new safe confinement, a steel arch bigger than a football stadium, was slid over the old structure to hopefully keep the site safe for another century. Now, this disaster wasn't just a local thing, or even a regional one. It fundamentally changed the entire world's relationship with nuclear power and left behind a legacy that we are still dealing with today. To really put the scale of the fallout into perspective, just look at this chart. The Chernobyl disaster released far, far more radioactive material into the atmosphere than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. It was without a doubt the single worst nuclear accident in human history. And the long-term consequences are just stark. About 350,000 people were eventually moved from their homes forever. A 30-kilometer exclusion zone was drawn on the map around the plant, and huge areas of land in Ukraine and Belarus are still uninhabitable to this day. But, if there's any silver lining to a tragedy this immense, it's this. Chernobyl was a brutal wake-up call for the whole world. It forced this global reckoning on nuclear safety. It led to international oversight, massive improvements in reactor design, and a culture of safety and transparency that just didn't exist before 1986. And what about Chernobyl today? Well, it's a place of strange paradoxes. With humans gone, nature has come roaring back. Wildlife is actually thriving in the forests that have grown over abandoned cities. But it's kind of a deceptive paradise. The radiation is still there, locked in the soil, a silent and persistent threat. In the end, Chernobyl is more than just a historical event. It's a profound and permanent lesson. It's not just a story about a failed reactor. It's a story about the immense power we as a species now hold in our hands, and the absolute critical responsibility that must always come with it.